Excellent. And so thanks folks for showing up. The VSGI speaker series is continuing again, and we have some great folks. This is a good follow-up to designing your own game. Last semester we had that's up on our website, so if you haven't seen that, obviously watch that. But Catherine, who is a teacher, professor, done a lot of things, right?
Yes.
And runs her own game company, and was part of the SGI for a while as well. Was always great. Has been kind enough to come here and talk about launching your own board game. So I'm going to sit back for the most part and let you kind of do your presentation. If I see questions, I'll kind of let people know. We'll answer them as we go along, or at the end, whatever makes sense as you're going. And I'll help as we get towards the end, if with making sure questions don't get missed or stuff like that. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to you, Catherine. You can do your own introduction if you want and talk. But there you go, launching your own board game.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is very meaningful for me because our success is due a large part to VSGI, and so. I was lucky enough to be a resident there for 3 years, and I joined 6 months after starting my own little company. And it's because of VSGI that I was able to actually learn business and how to do all of this, and then build upon it after I left. So I thank you so much, and it's such a great honor to give back and to be invited back. So a little bit about me before we start. Well, okay, so the background is, I'll tell you about ideas. So based on last week, I know that Professor Grimsby talked about how to create your own board game. And so if you're here watching this, it's because you have an idea for a board game, or you've already started building a board game, or you have some kind of concept of what you want to do. And perhaps you're at the end stages and you just want to take it one step further. And so I show this book because it's probably one of my favorite books, and it's really inspirational. It's a children's book, but it's all about entrepreneurship and like symbolic meaning, and like you have this idea, what do you do with it? It's really scary, and there's so many possibilities, and like how do you change the world with your one idea? So that's why I put this here. So my idea from my background, my idea was this company called Catlilli Games. So I'm actually a neurobiologist. I went to Duke University for undergraduate, and then I went to the University of Virginia to get my PhD in neuroscience. And then after that, I did 8 years of biomedical research, with 5 years at the NIH and 3 years at an autism nonprofit lab. And I was fully dedicated to research, loved it. I wanted to do that forever. But the hard truth is that when I got to the point of becoming my own professor, running my own laboratory, I had my first child, and it was just impossible to be in the lab, because for biomedical research, you have to be there all the time, 80 hours a week. And I never saw my children. So I was like, what else can I do? And so I started being a writer at first, like a science writer, but it really wasn't satisfying because I was working by myself in a room. So I love people. So I started dabbling in teaching. And then basically I got my feet wet at this after school science center. And I love teaching. It's my passion in life. And I really feel like it was meant to be my mission is to bridge scientists with the public. And I can do that one-on-one with teaching children of all levels. At the science center, it was ages 2 through 12. And now I'm at a public high school. But I wanted to reach a bigger audience. So that's where my games came in. So at the Science Center, I was in charge of creating curriculum for ages 2 through 12 in all the life sciences from scratch. And so a lot of what I would do would be games, there's mini games that I would create in the class, because they were small classes and we wanted to be hands-on, and games were the most effective way of teaching these concepts. And they were just very small games, kind of fun for me, because I've always loved board games and I love just designing little things in my spare time. But that's where I met another teacher there who used to be an engineer, and then he became a teacher, kind of my similar path, but the engineer path. And he also designed games for all of his classes. And so one day he brought in a game. He made a prototype at home of this engineering card game, and it was just genius. And I'd never seen anyone actually make a prototype of their own game. Like mine were all in my head, or like this, sad looking cardboard thing or paper thing that I bring to class, but he had sleeved his, and it was a really, really nice game. And I convinced him one day because in downtown DC, the National Academies of Sciences had its own museum, and they had this game designer night where they invited people all over DC, game designers, to come in and play test their game with the public. And so I convinced him to go because he's not one for like public showings and things like that. But I was like, I'll do the talking, you just bring your game. So he brought it, and it was a smash hit. And his table was by far the most crowded table. And then the museum invited him back for his own special night. And so it was really enchanting, the whole thing. And I had started making a game for class called Cycles that then my partner, John Nardalili, he was helping me with that. And so I was like, well, we have more games. And so we started making these games together. And then I left that job. And it was sad because we weren't going to be working together anymore. So he asked me, do you want to make a little company? And I was like, well, sure. So that's how it started. So it's not really one game. It's a line of games. It's more like a mission. Like these are all science themed games that are fun and are primarily fun, but they are based on educational concepts. So you learn without realizing you're learning. And we're very passionate about not having trivia games or something that's not replayable or not fun. Like the core mechanic has to be based around something that you are trying to teach. And so that we're a mission-based game company, and we now have we have a lot of games like under development. We have probably 9 games that are like ready to go. And so it's not just one for us, it's a whole line of STEM games. I know some people have one, and that's fine too. It's just that's the way that we approach the whole thing. They're small, simple, something you can play in like half an hour, but they get the concept across. This is my website. It's catlilli.com. I have a little thing at the end. So if you want to look on your own time, you're welcome to. But one of the first things that you should do is build a website, as VSGI told me. So I just do this myself because we're small. But it has a lot of different tabs about us, about all the games that we have, free resources for teachers, scholarship, like things we've written, publications. We've done some peer-reviewed research on games for teaching, all kinds of things. And so this is our brand. Our brand is games that are fun, but also happen to be educational tools. So let me tell you what I have learned over the past 6 years. So we formed Catlilli 6 years ago, 2015, in January. So it's almost our 7th birthday. And so I've tried many different things because it's just, I guess it's part of the scientific method, right? Like you dabble in one area and you grow as a company, and you realize what business model is best for you. So when these are different avenues that I tried, and these are like kind of the main avenues that you could possibly take if you have a product or a line of products and you want to bring it to the next level. So one is self-publication. And so I'll go through the pros and cons and the various forms of that. One is licensing, which that's primarily what I've been doing for the past 3 or 4 years. And then crowdfunding, which I've recently gotten into, and I can give some background on that as well. So we'll start with self-publication. Okay, self-publication. So there's 2 routes to go with this, right? So if you have the personal funds yourself, so you could go that route, or you could get investors to sponsor your project. And there's pros and cons to both of these, depending on your situation. So with the two options, if you have personal funds, if you happen to have that much money to start your projects, you do have total control. So that's nice. So for me, that's really important because I'm very mission based. I get very nervous about losing the vision of the company because in the board game world, I have talked to many, many different people in the field, like Matt Leacock, who made Pandemic, was kind of mentoring me for a while. And he told me, like, you're not going to make money from board games. So don't kind of sell out your vision to try and make the most money. You need to stay true to what you're trying to create. And for me, that is STEM education. And I get really worried about letting other people invest because I don't want to create something that's not true to my spirit and my soul. So it just depends on you and your personal flexibility on that. To do that, you either have to be independently wealthy or have another job that pays well, which is difficult for most people. I did not have a separate stash of funds. Like I said, I'm now a high school teacher, so I definitely don't. So what you could do also, if you don't want investors, is maybe get a small loan, or I've gone to different entrepreneurship events like 1 Million Cuts, and looking at how to start a business is like, if it's small enough, you could just not go through a bank per se with a formal like loan. You could put it on like a small credit card just to get started. People recommended that option as well. So those are two avenues you could go. But regardless, if you do this, you should definitely set up a corporation. I have an LLC, so it's a partnership. So initially, Catlilli was me and John. And so it was 50-50 and it was an LLC. There's various other things, like once you get bigger, you could be an S Corp. There's different situations, but for us, the LLC was the most suitable. And it's relatively easy to set this up. You could do it online. I think the fee's like $100. You could have your certificate by the end of the day. Like it really is that simple to set up. But then if you do have a partner or more than one partner, it's really vital that you have an operating agreement so that you understand, like it's in writing, how the business is going to work, how you're going to divide things up, and what happens if one of you should want to leave. So that needs to be actually written down, even if you're really good friends or whatever. It needs to be established, like how the company is going to operate. And then if you do want the investor route, which initially when I was at VSGI, that's what I started doing, was I built a business model, and I had a pitch deck and all of that. So not that investors is bad, it's not at all. I just found that over time, like it wasn't really what I wanted. But it can definitely be beneficial for you depending on your situation. And you need to put together a business model and a pitch deck and a business profile and network a lot. So there's different networking events in the game industry, and I'm going to show some of them later. There's also business organizations, pitch contests, and I believe my next slide shows this. So yeah, some helpful resources for all of this, for like if you can find a business incubator, like I had VSGI, but there's other ones you could be a part of. That is extremely helpful for mentorship, especially if you have no business background. Like I'm a scientist and a teacher. I'm not a business person, but I learned a lot about how businesses run, which was vital. And initially, so there's enterprise entrepreneurship centers. And in my case, the reason I even found VSGI was because when I first established the LLC, in our first 6 months, I live in Warrenton, Virginia. And so I went to a local branch of the Mason Enterprise Center here in town. And the person here said, oh, you make games, you should really get connected to the Virginia Serious Game Institute, which I never even heard of at that time, even though I'm really close to Manassas. So they're wonderful. Like they gave me so much helpful information, the connections, networking, like I can't say enough good things. And so they can help lead you in the right direction of the forms you have to fill out and how to arrange all of this. And so the Small Business Administration, the SBA, is also very helpful. I met with a man once a month for a while, because they're like, this is their job. They're supposed to help you. And so he was very supportive, and even like the emotional support, which was nice, because it's really scary to set up your own LLC and get started that way. And he also had connections and advice for me. And co-working spaces can be wonderful. So after I left VSGI a few years ago, I found a co-working space in Manassas. And even if the other people using the co-working space have nothing to do with you, you can learn a lot from them and how they're building their company. And there's also different mentorship events, like weekly things like lunch seminars, and just, how to get your marketing done, or something like that. Like there's always educational things to help you promote your game or your product. And so there's also entrepreneurship events. So something else I started doing when I was at BSGI, I think maybe even actually Risa set me up with this maybe, but it was a program called 1 Million Cuts, where entrepreneurs get together maybe once a month, I can't remember now, but you just come together and somebody just says, hey, here's my situation, here's my company, here's a problem we're trying to solve. And they present, and then everyone gives feedback, and it's wonderful. It's like a little support group in a way, because it's really, 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 really hard to start your own business, and it's scary, and usually things go wrong. And so it's just nice to be around other people. Otherwise you're isolated by yourself thinking, what am I doing wrong? That's so terrible. But everyone's in the same boat. So that is also extremely helpful. So that's if you're doing like self-publishing, either with your own funds or alone or with investors. Any of that will be helpful or helped by all of these things here. So, okay, so then after I left VSGI, I changed my whole business model. So I no longer wanted to get investors or even, find my own funds and do it myself, because I realized if I did have my own funds, even my own personal funds, I don't really want to be manufacturing and fulfilling and shipping things full time. Like that would be a full-time job, and that's not my expertise, and that's not my interest. I like the creative part. That's what I like, and that's what most people like. Like doing all the rest of the stuff is pretty tedious, but I really that's just not how I want to spend my time. I like teaching, and I don't want to give up my teaching job because that's my passion. So I needed something where I could still have my company and try and launch my games, but also have another wing of my life. So I decided, well, I would talk to all these game people in the game world, like Matt Leacock was very, very helpful. I got to connect with Melissa Bernstein from Melissa and Doug. Fun fact, so I just wrote to her out of the blue because I saw an interview a long time ago. We had both gone to Duke, and she had a whole story about how she had this job, and then she realized she really wanted to make toys, and people thought she was crazy, and then she formed this whole company. So I was really inspired. So I just cold emailed her out of the blue and said I was really inspired, blah, blah, blah. I'm starting my own game company. And she wrote back and was like, hey, call me. Like within 10 minutes, she wrote me back. And so I had a phone conversation with Melissa and Doug. And so I've had wonderful, wonderful, amazing luck with talking to people who are really wanting to help new people. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for advice. People love giving advice, especially to new, young, game designers. So one of the things I learned from talking to all these various people was that licensing was an option for me. And so licensing has its ups and downs, because you are licensing your game to a large or larger company. Could be a nationwide company, an international company. So they take away, they take over all of the manufacturing, like the publishing part, the fulfillment, shipping, all of the stuff that I'm not good at. But in exchange for that, your royalties that you should expect are only 3 to 5%. That's pretty standard for the board game world. I think even if like you're a superstar game designer, like the highest I've ever heard anyone tell me that they got was 8%. So it's not like it's a huge amount. So therefore, to make any money like that, like you need massive amounts of games published. So it has to be like a really large corporation to really see money come back. So as long as you're going into this with your eyes wide open, like unless you have like a smash hit, like a Ticket to Ride or, you know, a Catan or something like that, you're probably not going to make a whole lot of money. But you can make a decent amount of money, but you're not going to become like a millionaire with this. So just keep that in mind. But so this is the route you can go if you just want to be creative and leave all the other stuff to someone else. So I've done this for 3 or 4 years now. And so these are the things that you need to do that. So it's actually changed a little bit over the years as I've been doing this, what people expect when you pitch to them. So you definitely need like a pitch deck, but it's not like a long, it's not like pitching to investors. It has to be short and to the point. You need to explain all of the highlights of your game in a few minutes. So what I've learned and what I've been told by the industry over the years is the first thing you do, you say the ages, the time, and the number of players. Like, because that's as professionals in the industry, they're looking at hundreds, if not thousands of people pitching to them, and they're looking for a game that fits whatever they need, whatever their company is looking for. So if I tell them right off the bat, this is ages 8+, 2 to 4 players, it's a dice battle game, then they know, like they can form in their head, if does this fit or does this not fit? And like, they really don't want you to waste their time. So it has to be short and to the point, a few minutes, and something that's quick. Something else you have to go in with is a sell sheet, which is like a little flyer, like a 1-page flyer about your game that is basically your pitch, but in flyer form. And there's templates online. There's a lot of templates online. So you can see good examples of what to do. And like there's a site called Cardboard Edison that gives lots of tips and strategies for things like this. There's various books. There's Jeff Engelstein has a whole blog series about sell sheets and game design, and he has a lot of books about it too. But it just has to be visually attractive, explain the requirements for the game, like the 3 I just mentioned. Also, like very, very briefly, like how to play the game, not all the rules, but like how does gameplay work and what is special about your game? Like why is your game unique? Why would I choose your game and not somebody else's game? And then you can pass those out at conventions, or you should always bring them to the pitch and leave them. But you definitely, before you start pitching, you need to have a sell sheet for every game that you're going to pitch. They will ask you for that, or they'll expect it. And if you don't have it, they're not going to take you very seriously. And then in recent years, what I have discovered, so I've been pitching to more, so I'm kind of a hybrid. So I have games that they're kind of family games. So Cycles is my first game, and it's more of a hobby game. I mean, it could wrap over to other genres, but my other games are very much kid friendly, simple, fun, people laughing, having fun while they happen to be learning, but you don't realize you're learning because you're having fun. So mine fit a lot to a mass market, not necessarily the hobby game market. So I go to a lot of toy game events too, and like as well as like niche ones for hobby games. So especially in the toy world, like at Toy Fair or like Hasbro and Mattel, and I've pitched to like Universal Studios. And so they have what's called a sizzle video that they expect. And if you don't have it, then they like just dismiss you. So it's basically a 1 minute. Some companies say even 30 seconds is what they want, but longer, like than a minute and a half is the most you could possibly go. But a minute is really what they're looking for. And it's like a commercial. And it doesn't have to be high production value at all. You could do it with your own phone. It's just, it needs to say, like, imagine your game in a commercial. Like, what would be the point that you would meet? Like, what's the aha moment, the hook that gets you who's watching the commercial, like, oh, that looks like fun. Like, what is that? And so you have to try and capture that in this video and put like cute music, and everybody always has like kids playing the game in the video. But so somebody at Hasbro was telling me, every video has kids playing that, like, we know kids are going to be having fun playing the game. So like, don't just show kids laughing, show like, what are they doing that's unique in the game as they're laughing. So don't just be like, oh, everyone's smiling. Like, it has to tell something about how your gameplay works. And so those are the main 3 things that you should definitely have in your bucket before you do any of the pitching. And also these help you kind of understand your game a little better. Like, I know by now, my thing is kind of my story is that I'm a scientist who likes to teach and fun games, right? I use fun games, which you happen to learn without realizing it. That's my hook, because there's not many game designers out there who were scientists and also teachers. Like, that's what I bring to the table. So when I make like a chemistry-based game, I know chemistry, like I know it in and out. So I have the expertise built into that. I don't have to have outside consultants, and I'm very picky about the science being accurately represented. So that's what I bring. And so they get to put like, PhD on there, and then it looks, better to the public, because then you're like, oh, this person knows what they're doing. So I know that's my hook. So you have to figure out what is special about your game. So I went to like this conference, Tabletop Network, in Dallas a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. And that's where all like the top board game designers in the world get together and have like a little retreat. And I had won a scholarship to go, which was like probably the most life-changing experience I've ever had in the game world. And they did a little like kind of a mini Shark Tank, which was a lot of pressure, like a spontaneous mini Shark Tank. And the scholarship people got to pitch to all these people, which is the most intimidating thing I've ever done in my life. Like, I've given lots of pitches, but like, these are my idols. And so it was kind of strange. But I would watch as the people went up there, and they kept saying over and over again, like, don't give me just another dungeon game or another, zombie game. Like, there's a million of those. Why would you make a dungeon game, and why is your dungeon game so special? Like, so you have to be very aware of the market and how many of your games are out there, and why is your game different from all the other games that are out there, because they're very critical, and the people you're pitching to know the industry very, very well. And so that they're looking for something that fits a role that nothing else does. So yeah, know what's special about your game. And then these are places, these are not all, these are like a sample of places that I've been that I can recommend. So you can pitch at various places. So it's really difficult just to submit your game to like a company website and expect anything to happen. It's probably not going to happen. It's hard to get noticed that way, and it really is like people to people, like networking, like how you get out there. So there's different places you can go. One is like conventions. There's a whole underworld of pitching that goes on, and they expect people to pitch to them, and they're looking like for the next designers. So it's very much like a happy marriage of people. The companies are looking for new games, and the new game designers are looking for companies. Like, there's so much like kind of speed dating going on in a way. So they, at conventions, they have appointment times blocked off. And if you have a connection or find an email and you email them, like, let's say 3 months ahead of time of the convention, at least 3 months ahead of time, say, I would like to make an appointment for a pitch to you at Gen Con, then they'll say, oh, okay, I have these times available. And so, but you have to get to them at least 3 months ahead of time, because they will be completely booked up if you just do it the month before, or even the week before. They'll just laugh at you because there's no time left. And then that means that you don't understand the industry. So Gen Con, definitely you can make appointments there. Toy Fair is in New York City. You actually have to pay a large amount to attend if you're not a retailer. For retailers, it's free, but if you're an inventor, it's like $1,500. So I haven't been there in the past. Well, they haven't actually had it in the past couple of years, but I went the first 2 or so years, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. It's just very expensive. Origins is another game convention. PAX Unplugged is usually in December. I don't think they've had that recently because of COVID. BGG Con is Board Game Geek Convention. That's usually in November. And the Tabletop Network conference, the retreat that I was talking about, it piggybacks with BGG Con. So it's like the 2 days before BGG Con in the same like convention space, usually in Dallas. It's been there the past few times. Geekway to the West is in St. Louis, usually in June. So yeah, there's this list, but there's more. And so be sure, if you find out which companies are there, to email them months ahead of time and make an appointment. There's also fun things that pop up like speed pitching events, because this is like a speed dating event where you sign up and sometimes you have to be accepted, sometimes not. And then they give you a list of like 20 publishers who are going to be there. And then you submit your games, they see all the submissions, and then you kind of match up who's interested in your games. So like there was one, I think it was Mojo Nation, where there were like probably 15, 20 companies. I submitted, I got like 7 or 8 that were interested. And so then I had my slot where I would get to pitch. And it's usually pretty short. That one I think was longer than usual. I think it might have been like 10 minutes maybe. There were other ones, since COVID, everything's virtual. There were other speed pitches where it's you looking at like a screen of like 50 people from all these different companies, and they give you 2 minutes to pitch your game. So that is the most intimidating thing ever, because you there's no feedback, right? It's just people staring at you. They can't talk to you. You just have to talk to them in 2 minutes. And then that's it. Then they say bye, and you have no idea what happened until later. So yeah, so look out for these things. Unpub is dedicated to unpublished designers, and they marry them with different appointments and different people, and you just hop on through the line and you give your same spiel to all these people and see what happens. Sometimes you do get feedback, which is nice, and so people can be really harsh or really nice or just polite. But the key is, no matter how like mean they are to you, you cannot have a reaction and get self-defensive. Because companies do not like to work with designers who can't take feedback, right? So even if they're really nasty to you, you'll get like a name in the industry of like difficult to work with, which you don't want. So that'll make them not sign you, because they want to sign people that they like to work with. Because I've heard stories of designers saying, okay, we really like your game, but we want to change X, Y, and Z, like small things, not huge things. And the designer will say, no, absolutely not. This is my game. I'm not changing it. And so then they don't get signed, because it's a fabulous game, but they're not willing to compromise on little details. So you can't have a fragile ego like that. So no matter what they say to you, you just smile and say, thank you for your feedback. And then you move on. But a lot of times people are very pleasant and nice, and then it's exciting too. But you really have to leave your ego at the door when you do these things. And then there's specific publisher events. So if you've done this for a long time and you get on people's emails lists and like all this stuff, you get invited. Let's like Blue Orange will have a day, and they'll send you an email and say, we're gonna have a pitch day next month on Friday, September, or whatever. And then they'll have appointment slots, and then you get to pick one. And so a lot of them do this. So like Haba does this. Hasbro has done this. Hasbro had actually a pre-COVID, they would invite people to their headquarters and they show off their headquarters and then make a relationship with you. And something else that's happened since I've done this for so long is that now there's these databases. If you do a pitch and the company initially likes you, so you have to get past that first stage. So say they're like, yeah, we really like this, we want to look into it further. Then you're in a database, an inventor database, and you get all the newsletters they send. and all the announcements. And so what's really cool is like Ravensburger. So they'll actually, like last week, I got a newsletter saying, these are the new games we're looking for. We want this kind of game and that kind of game and that kind of game. And if you want to make that, you can submit it, which is really cool because I would never have known that if I just blindly submit my games, right? So now I know, okay, they want a dice game for this age. Maybe I can make something like that. So it's really nice. And when we pitched to Universal, it was at one of these speed pitching events. They really liked one of our games at first. And so we got into their database, which is nice because it's not just them, it's a whole bunch of different companies that I would never have known about. And it's like called Tinkerly, and they're in control of everything. So once you're in the door, you get in these databases and these lists, then they have to take the decision back to headquarters. And usually 3 to 6 months later, you hear if headquarters said, yes, we want this, or no, we're not going to make it one of our final games. So it's a little heartbreaking sometimes if initially like you have an awesome pitch and they're like, this is wonderful, we love it, we're going to send it along, this is great. And then 6 months later you hear, oh yeah, we pitched it to headquarters and they said no. So it's like, it's not like here, like you pitch and it's done. It's kind of an ongoing thing. The person you pitch to has to then pitch it to the headquarters people and then get them to approve it. So it's a whole long, lengthy process. So yeah, I could go on forever about the pitching because I've done it for so long now. I find it really exciting. I now love it. So I'm not scared. Initially, I was terrified, but now that I know what I'm doing, I find it really exciting and fun. And even if people say no, which I get a lot of no's, but I also get a lot of yeses. And so it's nice to see, where my home for my game might be. So the last avenue is crowdfunding, which is, I know the least about this because I just started this myself. So you probably have heard of these two. So there's Kickstarter, which is the main platform for board games. It's the most popular one. So there's Indiegogo, which is also a platform, but Kickstarter has a much wider audience. Kickstarter, you have to meet your funding goal in order to get any of the money. So if you don't reach the goal in the time stipulated, which is suggested usually to be 30 days, then you're not going to get any of the money. Indiegogo, it's a much smaller audience, not as many customers or viewers, but you can collect any money raised. So there's no you have to make it or that's it. So there's pluses and minuses. Back in my second year of business, we were actually semi-finalists in the Duke Entrepreneurship Pitch Competition. So as semi-finalists, they made every semi-finalist create an Indiegogo. So when I was at VSGI, I got to make that, and then Professor Casey helped me make a video. It was really nice. And so we got some money from that, and that was like getting kind of our feet wet. We had to be dragged kicking and screaming to do it because it's not really our thing. But that was my second year of business. So now I'm in my 6th year of business, and I'd always heard from people not to do a Kickstarter until you have your own audience. And that's actually my next slide. Because a Kickstarter is not just, here's my game, I'm going to throw it on there and see what happens. It's a full-time marketing campaign. It's very strategic. You have to devote yourself time to promoting your game, making connections, marketing it everywhere. And you have to start doing this, months, if not a year ahead of time. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to see what happens, because it will fail. And one of the people that, when I was at VSGI, we actually had the mini museum come give a lunch talk, because they made millions of dollars in their very first day when they launched the mini museum. Great advice. And that was definitely his refrain, was this is a full-time marketing campaign. Don't do it unless you can bring your own audience to the campaign. So I have enough connections now after 6 years that I felt comfortable doing that. And so I'm kind of bringing back to life our very first game cycles that I I didn't find a home for it and I stopped pitching it. So I was like, okay, you know what? It's a really good game. I'm going to bring it back and try and do a Kickstarter. So when you do it, I'll show you like mine as kind of an example, but you have to include your story in the Kickstarter page, why you're doing this, who you are, why do we care, videos, testimonials. You have to get outside reviewers to review your game, like YouTube, podcast, whatever, pictures of the game, how to play, what the contents might be. It doesn't have to be set in stone yet, but like some idea of what you're working with. And then the basic rules are, for a successful Kickstarter, 1/3 of your funding has to come in the first 3 days. So typically, if you don't have that in the first 3 days, you're going to fail. So that's a clear sign if you're on track or not. And then 1/3 of your funding comes in the middle of your campaign. And then 1/3 comes usually in the last 3 days. So if it's typical time frame is 30 days, then the first 3 is 1/3, the middle like 3 weeks is another 1/3, and then the last 3 days is 1/3. Sometimes if things are going spectacularly, you can get funded early or even in the first day, but like that hasn't we're 70% funded in the first week, so I'm happy about that. But it's not one of those like first day funding situations. What Kickstarter has turned into is kind of a pre-order mechanism for large companies. So you will see huge companies have Kickstarter campaigns, which at first I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like they already have their own business, but it really has turned into this situation where it's just a way to pre-order and then fulfill it later, which is, I don't know, it's kind of losing the original intention of Kickstarter, which was to help independent people create their own projects. But I mean, it's definitely a way of doing things, right? So it's just that there's two things that you look at Kickstarter: large companies with basically pre-order mechanisms, and smaller companies or people that have smaller campaigns that are bringing something to life from nothing, basically. And then be prepared to run your little small business, because you will have to do things that aren't the most enjoyable, like all the little like paperworks and spreadsheets and all of that, but there's tools to help you, like there's pledge managers. And I use this amazing book called Board Game Kickstarter Advice from the Best in the World by something called the Board Game Design Lab, and the author is Gabe Barrett. I don't know if you can see, but it has chapters from, I don't know, like 100 of the world's like best board game designers who had successful Kickstarters tell you exactly what to do. So I highly recommend that. And then this is my last slide, but like we just launched this last week, September 14th. So you could go to the link and you can see my project, and I have the whole story and everything laid out the way, frankly, the way the book recommended me to. The book was so helpful. So I followed their kind of advice on everything. So if you want to see what the book says, I pretty much followed like the story, the people, the game, the videos, testimonials, reviews, all of that. And the pledge levels, and there's many different things in there. But yeah, we're 70% funded and there's 3 weeks left. So I'm very hopeful that we could finally bring this guy to life. So there's a link there. And then that was it. I know I've talked for a long time. But this is my name. The co-founder and CEO of Catlilli Games. That's my email. I love to help. I love questions. I'm a teacher at heart. So you can email me. And then my website for any resources. I have a lot of free resources, well, mostly for teachers, but other things too. So you can go to catlilli.com, and there's a lot of information there as well. So
excellent. That was great. That was very informative. I added some of the links in chat as we were going, and I think that gets saved too. So if there's any questions that people have, I didn't notice a lot come in chat, but feel free to add them to chat. And that book sounds great. I have to figure out where to get that one.
Yeah, it just came out. I can't say enough good things. Like I was just, yeah. It's not only like the Board Game Design Lab, like, little chapters on what to do and when, but it has like all those chapters on advice from the greats, and it was just phenomenal.
Oh, that's awesome. One of the questions I figured that people might have that I don't know that we touched on it offhand would be, so what was the process like in finding someone to actually produce the game itself, right? Like to help you, you know, create the game so that
Mhm.
you can mail it out to people and things like that, right? Like I know you've used different people to
Yeah.
kind of make those games. Like
Hmm.
how did you find those? Was that people that you found on a list? Was it people that you just kind of looked for and searched for, or?
Well, yeah. So, well, I primarily use a game crafter for my prototypes.
Hmm.
And I don't know how I found them. I think the first year when I was at VSGI, somehow I encountered that. Somehow I don't remember, but I remember not knowing about them. And then that first year when I was full time at VSGI, I somehow learned about them. And then there's other ones though, right? There's like print and play, I think.
Hmm.
And there's other ones that like they're lesser known. And there's more coming up, I think, because they're trying to compete with GameCraft and have different options. And
Gotcha.
there's also, so I, even from the very beginning, I didn't really want to manufacture any of my things from China. And
Sure.
um, mostly because I was very passionate about having American made things, but even more recently because the shipping costs have just increased dramatically with COVID. And
Right.
so I really don't want to. And so it's hard. So it's easy to publish card games within America because that's
Hmm.
easy and cheap. If your game has lots of little pieces, you really kind of have to go to China. Otherwise, it's just not cost effective at all.
Okay.
So that's what everyone tells me. And so I think people are trying to establish alternative options here now because this COVID shipping situation has like really created a necessity for us to find a different solution.
Hmm.
But I think it's still really hard. So I'm lucky enough that the ones that I've been self-publishing are mostly cards, very, very few pieces. It's not like a,
Right.
scythe or root or something.
Little
Um,
minifigures and stuff. Right.
yeah, like, but if I was like, there's no way I could do that in America and make any money
Gotcha.
whatsoever. But there is, so the people that create Flux, the Looney Labs,
Yeah.
they use I think it's called Delano. It's spelled like Delano, but I think you pronounce it Delano. So Delano Manufacturing, they're in, I want to say Wisconsin.
Hmm.
Either Wisconsin or Michigan. And I've heard really great things, and they're great at giving quotes, and they could even do like warehouse fulfillment and offer different
Oh wow.
services now. So they're also a good option for their minimum order. I think the minimum is 1,500 copies of the game. And
Gotcha.
then, so I think like for our card game, the lowest we got for them was like, I think it was $8,000. But the more copies you get, like, so if I bought $8,000 worth of cycles, let's
Right.
say, it would cost them $7 to make it. And so, but if I bought
Gotcha.
5,000, then it's like $3. So
Wow.
my costs, my margins would go way up, but then I have to buy 5,000 copies. So
Yeah, that's the problem, right? I think those are some interesting logistics for people to think about, right? Like, and that's why you said, like, having the amount on a Kickstarter is a huge thing to think about, because, and we talked about this honestly before we actually started recording earlier. It's like, with shipping costs changing and all these other things, like knowing these production costs, a lot of Kickstarters have struggled because they've gone on quotes or thought it was going to be a certain price, and then things have changed.
yeah.
um, and I know a lot of people, for example, and maybe not even just board games, but like they always have these like, hey, and if you do this, we'll give you this little free tchotchke little doodad, for pledging. And it's like, but then they didn't realize how much sending you a T-shirt cost, or making the T-shirt. And it's
Yeah,
like,
like,
oh gosh,
yeah, never mind.
yeah, whoops. So that's awesome. It looks like we have a question in the chat too. If I wanted to make a card game that isn't educational based, is there any resources that you suggest? Like, it sounds like they're in the early stages of making a fantasy kingdom player versus player game. So other resources for just like card game design or things like that that you might think of that you could suggest.
Yeah, so actually a lot of what I mentioned would be the same. So mine just happens to be educational. And I
Right.
kind of learned to hide that when I'm pitching it. I I don't, you remember the game Crazy Cats where you have like the
Yeah.
dice and okay, so I used to pitch that and mention all the sciencey words, like all the
Right.
genetics words, like dominant or something. I used
Yeah.
to do all of that. And then no, like everybody hate like no, 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 like no.
Yeah.
And it was our most popular game. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then I I changed it one day and I pitched the exact same thing. I just left out all of the science. Like it was
Yeah.
the exact same game. I just used like odds and evens and like I didn't mention any of those. And everybody loved it. And so
Uh,
it's really, I don't know if it's disturbing because like they know if you hear the word educational, it's not going to sell.
right.
So
Well,
basically now, yeah, go ahead.
because traditionally they've not been as fun, right? They've concentrated
Yes.
so much on the learning that it's beating you over the head. Where it's like you said, if you can make it fun and they happen to learn at the same time, I mean, that's a great game.
Yeah, like Wingspan, for instance, is not really an educational game per se, but you
Exactly.
can learn a lot from it. So that's basically how I pitch now. It's like, hey, here's my game. Oh yeah, it happens to have science. So,
Right. Right.
and whatever gets it out the door that people can learn science, I don't care how it gets there. It's still the same game, no matter how I pitch it. But yeah, a lot of the same resources are the same. So yeah, I mentioned like Cardboard Edison.
Yep.
Um, they're wonderful on advice for people. I think they have like a website, blog. I'm not sure, like different videos. I know they're on Twitter a
Yeah,
lot.
I linked it earlier too. Just I found it and linked it to them as well. But there's a lot of videos and links on there. But yeah, I think that's good. And I think you said some of this earlier that might be worth repeating for that question is like if you try to figure out what is your brand, like what is the pitch for it, right? Like it all
Mhm.
comes down to is how do you get somebody excited about it, right? Like Caitlin says, Fantasy Kingdom player versus player. But when you think about it and you see somebody playing it, what gets their attention first, right? What is it that's really going to draw them to this game, and what is going to cement in their mind what your game is doing. And I think that's important. Like you said with Crazy Cats, right? Like
Mhm.
it was the fact you were making crazy cats seem to get people's attention. Sure, you're going to learn, but it was the crazy cats. Kids like
We'll
that
hide
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
I know, and that's
Yeah.
always what draws. It really is our most popular game, even though it's our least strategic. Actually, there's no strategy really at all.
Right. No,
It's
it's
just
dice rolling.
yeah, it's just dice rolling and drawing on a whiteboard, and but that's the hook somehow that
Right.
people see that and people are laughing, having fun, like, oh, I want to do that thing.
Yeah.
Or if it's cat, like, which is ironic because I'm actually allergic to cats. I don't like cats at all. But our we made Crazy Cats because of the name of the company. And anyway, so
Yep.
like cats is now the thing. And I always, when I pitch it, I tell companies it doesn't have to be cats. It could be it could be llamas or unicorns or whatever. But they're always like, no, people love cats. I'm like, oh. But
Oh, that's funny.
it really is like the theme is very important.
Yeah.
And so there's always like this kind of, I don't know, cliched argument in the board game world I've learned is it themes versus mechanics? Which
Right.
comes first? And people kind of laugh when that question comes up because it's always asked all the time. So for me, though, it's theme. I want to get across a certain theme or idea. For some people, it's the mechanic.
Yep.
And then they build up a theme around like this cool mechanic. So it really just depends on what you're doing. And so there's Cardboard Edison, there's the Board Game Design Lab who published this book that I have. They also have a website, and they're on Twitter quite a bit. Very helpful. So I have this playtesting journal I absolutely love. I actually had their own Kickstarter for the playtesting journal, but it's called Fail Faster. And it comes with each page has like, it's completely set up for playtesting, like who's playing, time for rules, time for start, time for end, rule changes, version, what was liked, what was not like amazing. But it also has, it's really cool. They have all the possible mechanics and themes that exist in board games in the front.
That's amazing.
And they have like, I don't know if you can see this, but it has like a little like table, and as you take dice and roll and see, like, if you just want to design a game but you don't know what, you roll and say, okay, I just rolled a 5 and a 2. That means I should make a secret unit deployment game based on prehistoric times. And so
Wow, that's great. That's a great brainstorming idea, right?
yeah, it's wonderful. And then Jeff Enkelstein, who I also mentioned, he has a series of books about how to create games. But there's, oh gosh, let me go get it. It's right there. Hold on. He came out with this card deck, which he gave away at Tabletop Network, but I think you have to buy it now. It's a deck of cards, but they're all different game mechanics. And so you just kind of like draw 3 cards and see what you get, and then go from there. Like, so there's like a time trap game, or a past action token. It's really cool. And so that's if you're, if you just want to design and don't know where to start.
Yep.
Or if you have a theme and you're like, I don't know what to do with this theme. But there's all kinds of great people out there who really want to help other people succeed. I have not come across anybody in the board game design world that, didn't want to help me, which is pretty remarkable.
No, I would agree. I tend to follow them, and I've seen the same thing you have. I've seen like all these people that make these games, they tend to be doing blogs or giving back, and they love the industry so much that they want to help out, which is great.
Yes. Game stores are a different story. I still have a lot of problems being taken seriously by local game stores.
Okay.
Not like Labyrinth. Like, Labyrinth is wonderful, but like they're still male dominated. I'm the only female in the store, and if it's that kind of thing. But like in the board game world itself, with the designers are phenomenal. So I don't incur, like, that's just a very supportive community.
Awesome. Well, I think we kind of ran out of time. We went a little over because we started a little late, which I think is great. No, it was very informative. I think this is going to be great, and we'll pass it along to people to watch if they didn't get to join us today. But I really appreciate you coming out and doing this. It's awesome. We put up your link several times, I think, for the Kickstarter. People should try out Cycles and try out some of the other games. It's like I said, they may be educational, but they're also fun. That's the most important part. And so we really appreciate you coming out, Catherine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I miss you guys. So thank you so much.
Yeah. We need to do some game nights or something, even if they're virtual. So
that's right.
Awesome. Very
Thank
cool.
You so
Thanks.
Much. All right.
Thanks so much. And look forward to seeing people come back for future ones and watching these on the webs and show it to your friends. Thanks, everybody.